All Carol. It's all Carol. Which one's the ones on meetup.com?
Summit in New York. Yeah, it was at the Google office. That's so much fun.
Yeah, the GDG Kansas City, we do it at the Google Fiber office. So, which,
Yeah.
you know, it's the start of Google Fiber.
Where are you from?
Kansas City.
Oh.
I just moved down here a month ago.
Oh, okay.
So I used to go to those for the last 4 years.
Uh-huh.
And so once I knew I was moving down here, I looked you guys up to
Yeah.
get down here.
Do you for work or?
No, my daughter wants to be a marine biologist, so we decided to move down here for her.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Oh, looking for people, you guys continue to get into this area.
Oh, yes.
Can be a bear.
I on like 275. Yeah.
Wi-Fi is right behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They've given us a free for everybody who joins, anybody who comes tonight, they get a chance for a free 1 month co-working spot.
Oh, nice.
So we can do a raffle for that.
Yeah. What are people here usually in code, like your normal 9 to 5, or is it there?
It varies. I mean, weekends we're at 7:30 to basically 7 to 7-ish.
Yeah.
Saturday or Sunday is off. Yeah, it's all access is 24/7.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
I was open.
You got like.
Yes.
That's nice. Does your company do?
So I don't specifically specialize in SEO. I get to a consulting firm. What I do with consulting firms is basically a term, but smaller companies that don't understand, maybe they really around half $500 million. Maybe around 20. They're good at serving a product or a service, but they don't have tech.
Yeah.
They don't have tech leadership. And so when I go in, work with C-suite, I'll understand this is what's up. And also I love the data execution. So a lot of my stuff is really platforms internally. It goes around this idea of innovation. Innovation is do innovation right and build primordial soup so people can innovate. So to do that, build platforms. A lot of it's like Google, Kubernetes, and whatnot. It's three things that are part of this architecture. And I get into this architecture, build it out, and then they can go from there. So that's the whole idea is turning company inside company. But also a lot of that thought leadership when that comes from my consumer product class, and that's a certain Spotify, it's not certain the Spotify for experiences. So the concept is when I moved down here, I had an issue like there's a lot of information on what to do. It makes it really debilitating because I'm confused. I want to be like, hey, what's going like give me something to do tonight, give me like a list of 3 or 4 things, like say I'm maybe you're meetings or you're so
Yeah.
so none of that had existed. So I launched about 2 weeks ago. Right now, we do restaurants and but everything's built on Google Cloud. So it uses GKE. It's my second startup that uses Google's infrastructure, and I love the Google infrastructure. I've used AWS, I've used Azure.
Yeah.
They all 3 of them have their uniquenesses where they're good at certain things. Like Azure from Elasticsearch, things are awesome. Also, Azure's made things easier to do. Google's made it very simple to kind of do certain things, and AWS has such a broad range of offerings that I really pick and choose from them. I tried to solely do everything on Google to get this time, but I found I'm going back to some other technology in AWS. Yeah, so that's what I did with Bill was what I basically I was the director of architecture at Haas, and we sort of company I was chair this past year. I left there to get back into start. So that's
Yeah.
but to answer your question directly, SEO. So I built my Clash. It's highly reliant on SEO. So the whole idea is when you go to Google, I wouldn't get it a lot. It's the application itself.
Right.
Also, the events and the experiences and the clashes that are on there need to be discoverable outside of the app.
Okay.
And so SEO is extremely critical for it. And so like
Yeah.
digging through that 8 months, there's a lot of like I'm gonna find out and I would call it I have to be careful because there's a lot of good information on SEO, but this one's sort of like they don't really scratch the table on what SEO is. And so it's from the technical background, what I realized is a lot of people do SEO, but they don't understand anything that actually is SEO.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah.
So everybody's like, well, let's backlink and let's write content.
Yeah.
What you're seeing is sort of the top 5%, but it's and I also also think like technology, to be a technologist, you need to understand you need to and it's all technology based upon a human system. It's like one of the physics and I sort of not mathematics, but mathematical theories, the process theory behind it, and what I call first principles. So not first principles. And so I got an absolute You can see there's like a chat on there. It's got, I think, about a minute or 2 minute delay, so it's really weird to watch. Yeah. YouTube 2 days ago, Verizon now.
Verizon stay.
That's right, it was Sprint.
No. Everything I did, I was a network engineer.
Yeah.
So we maintained a wireless network for them. And so I did that for 13 years, and then I became a manager of the tier 1 group that I originally started with 13 years ago. And then since we moved down here, I had to give up my manager position. And now I'm working for the process and analytics team that supports the team I was managing. So that's what I'm currently doing right now.
You work from home?
Yeah. Which is good. So,
Yeah.
But no, I'd like to get back into management of some sort. But I've looked. I really haven't found anything down here that's really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
I also don't know a lot of companies down here. I tried going through K-Force, staffing agency, and they didn't really have anything. And then luckily my boss was able to get me in with the other group and keep me on. So it gives me more time to look. So. Yeah. But no, I used to go to the GDG. I think that there for the last 4 years. So the way I found them was after Google Fiber moved in, they built this hub in the trendy part of Kansas City, and they since I can't afford to go to Google I/O, they had it extended.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Went there and became friends with the guys who run it, and one of the guys, the main guy who ran it, he just actually got hired on by Google, so he technically can't be a part of the GDP anymore.
Yeah.
So
How you doing?
but
Yep. Okay. Gordon, nice to meet you.
hang out here and what you guys know.
Yeah.
So, now, are you part of the GDP or are you part of Rendertron?
Oh.
Okay. What do you guys normally need at?
We've been meeting at Secure Academy.
Okay, all the way by me.
Yeah.
I live in
I'm
North
really,
Carolina.
it's really
Oh,
decent
okay.
too. You can see
So
the
a lot
website.
closer than this.
Yeah, yeah.
For the Bensing.
Oh.
So this is what like, you know,
Okay.
this is what it looks like.
What's the Android group? Okay. you did it this year in Orlando as well, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it was last year, November. This year, it's gonna be in January. 2018, but, that's Florida.
Yeah, I'd like to go, but that's right when the house is supposed to be done, and
Oh, yeah,
so,
yeah, it's January 19th.
Okay. Cool. What's your problem with
Mhm. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, if we were gonna just do it for just this area, we could. But,
And that thing's broken.
I have opened it successfully once or twice, but not always. I'm not finding that Android one.
Yeah, what's happening? I got that FAC back that runs all the time. This one doesn't run.
Tampa Bay Android Developers Group.
Is it more warm outside?
I'm not positive. We could try it. If it's too noisy for you, I'll close it.
Did you find it?
Yep, I just found their meetup group.
That's what I'm loving. Flutter.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about switching on my server side. It's still probably all be Java. I'm thinking about switching all my front end technology straight to Dart. I've been using Flutter for my apps and using Dart. I'm using Angular right now, which is usually released Angular 7 today. Side project. But yeah, I love that. I'm really looking at Dart. Dart is, from my perspective, is amazing. But solving, because they have a Dart engine that's now inside Chrome and other browsers are bringing in, it's solving a lot of issues that the HTTP1 era had because of how people look at web apps back then and how we look at them now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played around with it some. I really like it, yeah. And I think it's like one of the best platforms.
been going with native, but then native also I played with Ionic a bit, and Ionic is nice, but I'm using like right now Flash.com as a progressive web app.
Oh, okay.
Now that PWAs came out,
Yeah.
to me Ionic I don't really need it. It's nice that you can be in the app store, but if you're on an Android device, the PWA solves your problem solved. It's only on iOS that becomes an issue. And that's for dark from them, but also I've had a lot of use cases lately where I'm like, okay, I do need to start running native. But there's also, I probably will talk about this talk, I did have a talk about it, about your architecture, sort of like your strategic approaches to how you use this technology for apps, because you have to have a web app. You can't go to native, depending on what your model is, you can't go only native apps, because like for SEO and things like that, for things that need to be discoverable by search engines.
Oh, yeah, my store's not yet.
Exactly. It's also changing the way I look at tech. Like my Clash.com, all the tech I look on there, it's meant like users use it, but it's also meant more for web browser or web crawlers than it is an end user now.
Oh, okay.
More my tech is going to like 50% towards how do I basically how do I present something well to the crawler, and then the other side present it well to the user. But then as the app comes online, the users will start using the app. And so it's now a strategic difference in how I sell technology.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's different problems being solved.
Yeah, that PWA problem with iOS needs to get resolved because the cheer group my daughter was with, unfortunately, all cheerleaders use Apple products because they're all girls. And, they're all high school teenage girls is what they use. And I was trying to talk to our developer guy making the website at PWA.
Yeah.
Like, this would be perfect. And it's like, oh, it doesn't work on iOS.
Well, so it does work on iOS. I can show you right now. If you go to Clash right now, I'll show you how to add it. So my PWA does work on iOS. The problem is the service worker at this point in time. It's a single threaded app. I can show you how it works. But the service worker is having an issue right now where like I'm using Firebase. The service worker will cache certain requests and restriction requests. The service worker right now is actually caching Firebase requests. And so I can't do certain things with when I'm authenticated. But here I'll show you actually, I have everything running on mine. If you actually go get an iOS device.
No.
I'll show you the PWA. So for example, this is the PWA on here.
My daughter's the only one that runs the Samsung device.
Here's Clash. Biggest thing right now is I don't want it's going to be slow because I don't have the service worker running. Otherwise, it pop up that way out. This is all self-control. I'm doing Clash right now. It's the same thing. Yeah, so it does work. It's just not fully. All right, we're at 6:45 and do some. Put my. Okay. Check 1 2 check. Looks like I got audio. Everybody out. If you can hear me, type into the thing if you can hear me well. We're going to go ahead and get started here shortly, right now. Alrighty. I think. I'm going to get some feedback from some folks on there to make sure it sounds good. All right. Well, this is fun. So
I think I'm going to go ahead and kick it off now. Let's see. I'm going to put that there. All right. Actually, I'm going to pull up YouTube on my phone at the same time, so if somebody sends a message, I can see the messages. YouTube, my channel. Let's see, Google broadcast. I need to share my screen. How about I do that? All right, there we go. I need to share my screen. Okay. This works now. This is fun because I'm trying to figure this stuff out today. This is the first time I've done live streaming. I wanted a different camera, but I got a webcam, an old webcam I had, which actually works pretty well in my audio setup. So, all right. Actually, could we shut that window? Thank you. Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming and girls for coming today. I'm Bill, by the way. So I think one individual here, but and this is the first time I'm meeting the rest of the folks, and this is the first time I've been involved with a GDG event, which is awesome because I found the Developers Guild. I've seen some stuff, and definitely coming to some future meetups. But also, I do a lot of stuff on the Google Cloud platform. I love Google Cloud. I built my first startup on Google Cloud in 2015. Almost went to market. We sort of went to market. Business partner and I had a difference of how to approach it. So we moved on. But now I'm doing a second startup, and it's almost primarily on Google Cloud's platform. I use Google Kubernetes engine for all my infrastructure, and I love it. Everything's containerized. It's a whole microservices-based architecture, and Google's just made programming easy. So little background about some of this is for today, I've got basically 5 things I'm going to talk through. SEO. So the first principles, things about referred to as knowledge graph, Google's knowledge graph, how to graph, and then SEO as an Angular app. As I talked about this being broad and deep at the same point in time, I'm going to try to stay out of some low technical stuff, but I will get into it. I do have a GitHub repo I am putting out there. I wanted it done by today. It didn't get done, so it'll be out in the next couple of days. On the repo, it will be containers and the code for doing this exact same reference architecture in your own containerized environment. So if you use Kubernetes or whatever your container orchestration layer is, you'll be able to do this exact same thing. So let me talk about my inspiration. So I have a company right now called Clatch. You guys can look at clatch.com, CLATSCH. The problem I'm trying to solve with that company is when I came here about 3 years ago, there's a lot of information about what to do. And I really just wanted to go to somewhere like an Alexa or Google Home and say, hey, I want to do something with beer and wings. And it just gave me 3 or 4 things to do and sort of schedule my agenda for me. There's nothing out there like that. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and create it. So over the past couple months, that's what I've done is I've created it. Part of creating it and working in the industry, what I've realized is SEO is huge for this because it's about discovery of information is really the key point of the application, but also making this discovery easy through search engines. Because where people generally start today is Google or Bing, and they say, hey, what's going on where, right? So I need to be very open and transparent to search engines, and that started my journey through SEO. Really, my inspiration is my own ignorance on this one. I think I bought 6, 7, 8. I'm probably sure I spent close to $200 on just SEO books. Read a lot of them, even some of the big ones, and I come to find out there's a lot of the main themes. I was a bit disappointed though by some of the content I got because a lot of it was not necessary. It was about SEO. It was about the hows and the whats. So how to SEO by creating links to your content. We all know that's how you SEO. and what to do to get to the top of the search engine is what you want the outcome to be. But nobody really talked about why. People talked about content above the fold, and these are all really good topics. But me being a technologist, there was an underlying human process there that wasn't being discussed thoroughly. And when I see that, like the human process not being discussed, that's when I'm like, hold on a second. There's something more to understand. People are telling me what I need to do as far as how to link and things like that. But what if I want to understand more and maybe come up with my own techniques? I need to dig deeper. So I started digging in, and a lot of this talk is based upon help from these two YouTube videos. I found this thing, it was at Solving SEO with Headless Chrome. I'm running an Angular application. A lot of people run Angular frameworks, and you guys know that anything that's dynamically generated at runtime in the browser is not the best thing to be SEO'd. A lot of search engines don't execute the JavaScript, so as I'm rendering my meta tags and whatever is in there, the search engine's not seeing it. So that's my number one problem. I have this wonderful working app, but as I've come to find out, really, it's more of the functionality of the app. What I'm seeing nowadays is becoming giving information to the search engine as much as it is be giving information to the actual individual itself. So it was about 8 months, a year ago, I saw this Solving SEO with Headless Chrome, and it was the Chrome team. They use something called Puppeteer, which is an end-to-end testing tool, to go in and actually call your page, render it first, and execute JavaScript, then send back this sort of look like server-side rendered script. And then about 4 or 5 months ago, I think the Firebase team came out and said, hey, here's how you can do this with Firebase. And I used a bit of their reference architecture to build mine out. So here's some links to the YouTube videos. I tried it doing it with Firebase. I was originally hosted on Firebase. I had issues with the way that they were doing it and how my app was architected. So I ended up switching to something else. Also, as I go through, there's going to be tons of various other blog posts and Stack Overflows. I put the code out there. It'll be commented on where I got these ideas from. I like to give some of the credit back because I wish I developed this all myself, but no, it was really just looking at what a lot of other people did and stitching it together in a way that worked for me. So let's talk about first principles. Everybody knows who's Elon Musk is, right? This is like one of Elon Musk's core things, first principles, always going back to it. And now, these are really the fundamental concepts, their assumptions or theories around a system that's it's based. Really more the basic foundational principles. And so as you look at any system, human systems or technology system, there's some underlying assumption. As I was reading through all this SEO material, I never saw anything talking about first principles. And not to go directly into first principles of SEO, I love that there was a conversation I was having one day. It was at a bar, and we're talking about Elon Musk and his first principles. And I don't know the validity of exactly the comment made, but it was something about Elon Musk looked at, like, when he was looking at space or was looking at doing the spaceships in SpaceX, he's like, okay, what does it really cost to send a rocket to Mars? And he got down to the first principles, like your basic, most atomic feature is the material this is made out of. Something like it costs like $80 or $800. So, this $1 billion rocket at the end of the day really only costs $80 or $800 to start with. And so he's like, what makes up that gap between $800 and $1 billion? What's going in there and creating that? And so that's what he's basically built SpaceX off of based on this conversation. I have to be careful because this is like a tertiary source. So I don't know the validity of the full conversation, but this idea behind first principles, like, okay, what do I need to do? What makes up that gap and why is it there? And if I need $1 billion rocket, why can't I make it 100 million and close that gap? So I went back and started researching what are the first principles of SEO. And who here is into data science and data structures? Triples. You ever heard of triples? This is a fundamental data structure. A triple itself is basically 2 nodes and an edge. A triple was found. It was based upon the resource description framework. It's a model there. But what a first principle is it has a subject, a predicate, and an object. These are the most atomic form for SEO, and I'll explain here why. But what is a subject, predicate, and object? Well, if you look at it this way, this is really what a triple is. Bill Bensing belongs to Rising Tide Innovation Center. So I'm the subject, belongs to, of course, the predicate, the verb, how it comes out, and then Rising Tide is the object. This is how you establish a basic relationship, right? This is all SEO is based on. SEO is a list of triples in a big database, a triple store somewhere. And this is fundamentally how SEO works. I didn't see this talked about in general at all, although I did dig in 2014, 2015, Google started releasing some 8 to 7 minute snippets of what we'll talk about later, but Kaylee, their graph database. And this all goes back to graph database and graph mathematics, and we'll get there. But their graph database and how to actually use that and how Google uses it to enrich search engine results. So i.e., this is your first principle. So starting with first principles, once you build a set of these triples into a triple store, you get something that looks like this. And fundamentally what this is the concept of a knowledge graph. Has anybody done knowledge graphing for notes? It's a really good way to take notes. Before I talked about knowledge graphs, anybody know what knowledge graphs are? Kind of. So that's your SEO is based upon a knowledge graph. That's actually how this all works. Funny as we get to it, a lot of Google's information they have nowadays, they bought Freebase, which was the open source they tried to collect in the semantic web back in, was it the early 2000s? They bought Freebase, I think, and they're using the technology now inside of Google search. They also have an API open. I couldn't find it. I found it one time, but now I can't find it anymore. But they have an API to where you can go see your linked data or linked data based upon a search. But if you look at this knowledge graph, and say we start with Bill, you can see a graph of knowledge relating to Bill. Now, why is this important? Well, because when search engines and people go in and look for information, this is how they look for information, how the search engine works. And the search engine has two basic types of ways it looks, two different basic algorithms. One referred to as a breadth algorithm. Now, a breadth algorithm sort of just looks at the span across a broad deal. So as you can see here, Bill belongs to Rising Tide. Rising Tide is located in St. Pete. St. Pete's located in Florida. So that's what's referred to as a breadth algorithm. I don't want to get too far deep into the mathematics, but what I want to do is I want to bring your attention to, as you talk about breadth versus depth, these different algorithms and what it means to your search engine and SEO results. And so as you see these connections based upon how these algorithms are put in there and which ones they use and they decide to use, it depends on how you get returned in your search engine results. So breadth versus depth will return different types of informations in different orders based upon the different types of connections. So let's go into depth real quick. So depth, looking at the same graph, goes deeper. So notice between depth and breadth, even though it's the same data it's querying, it's returning different results. Now, why is that? And it's based upon the calculation. So depth, when you think about depth starts at the top, and the idea is to go as deep as possible for information, whereas breadth is broad. So you think about a tree structure, it goes broad, left to right, and seeing things are sort of ancillary to your main node. And then depth is going very down, and you're digging deep into that main node. That makes a difference because you can return your search results will come back different in different orders in different ways. And if you want to be at the top of the search engine, well, it's how am I, whether it's a breadth or depth type of algorithm, go always related to that main node, and how do I link to that node, and how do I do good linking to that node, and what is that node? Because that's some of the ambiguity out there is these, nobody knows the search engine algorithms, and they're kept proprietary for a reason. So that's really a bit, that's what I want to go about the first principles around the knowledge graph. So I didn't get brought into the mathematics, kept it a bit high level, but this is really how your search engines are operating at the end of the day. So let's talk about Google's knowledge graph. So Google's knowledge graph is called Kaylee. Kaylee, as I was talking about, was based upon the Freebase project. I think around 2007 or so, got bought out by Google. And it was a whole idea behind the semantic web. So I think a lot of people here old enough in their career to remember the whole talk about the semantic web and everything like that. It's still alive and kicking. That's what's driven a lot of your search engine result or your search engine approaches. So what does Kaylee offer? Well, Kaylee offers this. So if you type in who is Bill Bensing, you ask that simple question. Those rich snippets are really powered by Kaylee, as I've come to find out. Now, it's not solely Kaylee, so I can't say Kaylee is the sole piece of technology behind the search engine. They've probably got a complex algorithm, which means it's supported by a couple different data stores, a couple different approaches. But in general, when you ask that question, it's doing a graph type calculation in graph mathematics to figure out, okay, what should I return? What content best fits this query, this incoming query? Who is Bill Bensing? And that's what you get. So a bit of my, as I was digging into this, was about rich snippets. Rich snippets are huge for somebody like me because what I want to do is, even though the person is using the application, what actually has to happen, the search engines need to come and understand the app as well, because nobody is going to natively start in my app or my website to search for their list of things to do. They're going to go to Google and say what's going on this Saturday or Sunday night. So I need the best way. I need to be as linked to that main node as possible. And how do we do that? So how do we do that comes into linked data. Linked data itself, so I think they call it the vocabulary. A lot of it's based on schema.org. Has anybody used schema.org? You guys using it? Everybody's used schema.org here. A lot of it's based on schema.org. This is they call it the verb of linked data. Here's an example of an event, for example. It is a model. It's a data model. This data model was put together by Yahoo, Bing, and Google. And what's the Russian search engine? There's a Russian search engine, a bigger one. I think it's Yandex. And Yandex, starting, was it mid 2000s, somewhere around there. There's these dates are on Wikipedia. I just can't remember them if they're right. But around there, they started coming up with these specs. Why? Because, well, you have all these different search engines that need to index this data. And search engines, even though we're getting to AI and whatnot, you have to be specific about your data to create these links. So they got together, they created schema.org. And so what does it look like? Well, schema.org has basically 3 different types of syntaxes. One is microdata. I don't know if you guys used microdata before, but it's in line with your HTML. The other one here is in these serializations is RDFA. RDFA is a spec. Your meta tags and everything. Like if anybody uses the Google Open Graph tags, those are RDFA compliant tags. Twitter tags are not RDFA. Does it matter? Not really. There's a spec, but there's a little tidbit of information. Same thing here. You're basically including it into your HTML markup on this. So it's giving you the schema where, like, you look at type of movie and it represents what the resource that it is. But then also now there's a new one called JSON-LD. Has anybody started using JSON-LD? So you're using JSON-LD. Is anybody else using it for anything? So I see Google pushing this really hard. And the interesting thing about this, I like JSON-LD from a programming perspective, is it allows me to abstract my SEO from my underlying HTML. Don't get me wrong, I still think you're using microdata and RDFA today is nice, but it also creates a tightly coupled application at your DOM layer when you're using RDFA and microdata. But what I like about JSON-LD is something like with an Angular app or a different app, I can just inject that. So I can take the same type of data that's dynamically generating my HTML and then dynamically generate this object and stick it in there. It's really simple, just in between a pair of script tags. It's JSON that is in the form of schema.org. So it's very simple. I like it, but this is also what Google is pushing right now for a lot of their SEO and to help link to link your applications. So as I was building this out with Clatch, I ran into a technical problem. I used Angular. It's a single page web application. Anybody builds apps with Angular or single page web apps? No? So here's an issue. When I build a normal website, let's say I'm using something like ASP.NET. It's not skipping my mind, but say I'm building some server-side rendered application, right? Server-side rendered application is going to return all my information. As I dynamically generate these pages, the server is rendering all of those HTML tags and they're sending it back. So no matter what user agent calls that page, if that user agent's a Google bot or if it's a Mozilla browser, they're getting that back. Well, Angular is a client-side rendered application. So what do they see? They see this. So when Angular loads, it will go through, make its API calls, then render this. Your problem is a lot of your search engines don't render JavaScript. And that's a big issue if you're using a single page web application. Now, they're amazing for a user experience. It gets over a lot of issues. It puts computing on the edge. But it gets over a lot of traditional issues with having a server client-side type web application and a native feel. And that's the whole idea behind single page applications, is it brings a native feel to the client. But the downside is it's rendering, the JavaScript's rendering your DOM in real time, and your search engines don't use JavaScript, so they're not getting a render. So basically, this is exactly what your user agents are seeing. Mozilla sees this, but his JavaScript engine takes over and starts rendering. And that's a problem, because what is in here, what tells me what this is JSON-LD is not in my client-side rendered deal. So I had to solve this problem. This isn't specific to Angular. This is Angular, this is React, this is Vue. Even if you build your own JavaScript framework, same thing. So here's my problem. Google is coming in, they're looking at my Angular app, and so are the browsers. How did I do this? So what I did here first is Google comes in and says, hey, I'm going to take a look around. I have an Nginx server that I host all of my single page web apps on. That Nginx server looks at the user agent, and if the user agent is a bot, it sends it to Rendertron. Okay. Now, Rendertron is the application. Let's talk a bit about Rendertron. We haven't talked to this deal. So Rendertron is I talked a bit about it in the very beginning. Headless Chrome. What Rendertron has done is it's taken Headless Chrome and an end-to-end testing solution called Puppeteer and sort of put them together into this app that can automatically generate, call a web link, and then generate the actual HTML itself, and then do things on it. So if anybody's done end-to-end testing with Puppeteer, there's another one that starts with a P, and it's not Polymer because that's not it, but I forget what it is. Another guy upstairs and I were talking about it the other day. These are great for end-to-end testing, but that's what they're doing with it is they're rendering it. Here's what I like about this. Traditionally, if I had to build an SEO rendered application, I may have two different code bases. I may have a code base for my client side and a code base for my server side. And that was an issue because imagine if you make an update to an app, you got to make it in two spots. The more complicated the app, the more updates you make. It's, you know, it seems linear, even though it's a linear update, it seems exponential in effort. So Rendertron will go, Rendertron will actually call the Angular application. Angular is going to respond how it always does. And then will get the Angular application. And then it will, Rendertron will take it, and it will render it. It will execute all the JavaScript and send it back to the bot. And so now what's happening is Nginx, because it knows, hey, based upon the user agents, this is Googlebot, so I'm going to go ahead and pre-render this and send it back. Or if it's your browser, your iPhone, your Safari, it doesn't hit Rendertron because you don't need that extra pre-rendered HTML. So this is the basic flow. And this is where I got it from Firebase. So where that N used to be, I used to have Firebase in there and using Firebase hosting and Firebase functions, but I had an issue. I couldn't get it to work completely with my architecture. So there's a really good video on how to do it if you want to do Firebase. The downside of that is I had to start hosting everything in Kubernetes. I love Firebase. It's an easy way to host, easy way to deploy. But now I got to, do everything inside of in Kubernetes, which is not that big of a deal. But I'll go ahead and whip through those slides real quick. I want to dig into some of the actual tech. I'll show you some of the scripts, how it works, and also I'll show you how to test this stuff if you guys use anything like Postman. How to replicate the Googlebot itself so you can see if it's working. So we're about 20 minutes in. What do you guys, any questions so far? Questions, comments? Anything like horribly stunning? Like as I've shown this to a couple people, some people are like, yeah, that's actually pretty standard. I'm like, wow, this to me this seems pretty ingenious. I'm gonna see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions on the chat. Questions? Anything confusing? No? Okay. So far, okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to exit out. I'm going to now go update the live view to show my screen. Show this, share. Okay. So let's talk about Nginx first. A couple things that I want to show here. I use Helm to do my deployments on Kubernetes. Does anybody use Kubernetes or containers right now? Are you using Kubernetes? Okay. So I'll show you a bit of what some things look like. I'm gonna go to a config map. So as I configure, this is a configuration for the. I wonder if I can duplicate this on that up there because I'm talking and looking at this, but you guys aren't seeing anything. Let me go ahead and mirror the display. You guys see that? Let me see the zoom a little bit. View. I said window zoom. Okay. Can you guys read that? Is it hard to read? No, a little bit. See if I can. I'm trying to zoom on this. Let's see. View, go debug, zoom. And my trusty Apple double click doesn't work. Maybe it's because I'm. I don't have control. I have command.
Sorry, Control+.
Oh, hold on a second. Look at you. There we go. Perfect. They're a little better. There we go. So this is some basic configuration. What I do want to show you is at the pre-render. So as everything comes in, it checks the user agent against some configured values. And my configured values here, for example, this is the bots. It's just a big string of bots that you can go through and keep going through. So what I'm doing in Nginx as I go back to the config is I'm just intercepting, looking at as that request comes in, who is it? If it's pre-rendered, so if it's pre-rendered, if it's not pre-rendered, I just respond with the index.html from the Angular app. Pretty simple that. If it is pre-rendered, I do a couple things though. I go, I set the vary to user agent, which is important because the Google, you want to make sure that you don't look like you're a, what do they used to call those? The pages that intercepted the Google bots that had different content than what the user saw. There's a specific name for it. Yeah.
They're faking it to Google bot by putting up different content.
Exactly. So Google, if you give Google different content, like Google, I'm sure they scrape it from many different user agents. But if the Google bot, like the bot on the search engine, sees something different than another bot sees, you're presenting different content, then they hit you on they most likely hit you on their scores. Gateway pages, that's what they're called. So what happens here is to let them know, like, hey, I'm letting them know, say, hey, I'm serving you different content. So if you hit this from a different user agent, it varies based upon the user agent. So I set the header varying to user agent, say, hey, it's going to vary on the user agent. I give it a bit of a cache control, and then I go through. And one thing I do is I actually call, and you can sort of see it through these here. I call the SEO render service. One thing I do inside of here is because it's inside of my Kubernetes clusters, I call my local services and I don't call the Clatch site itself. So it goes to Rendertron, and Rendertron will call the internal DNS, not the external DNS. And the reason I do that is once you call the external DNS, you make all those network hops around the world to get back to your own set of servers. And so you can remove God knows how many network hops just by calling your internal service instead of calling your external service. Makes it a bit more efficient. One thing I've seen is it can take 3 to 5 seconds sometimes for Rendertron, once it gets the call, to render and respond. I haven't seen an issue with timing out yet. Some of the debugger tools on Facebook I've seen time out a couple times, but in general, I haven't seen any issue outside of that. But that's really how the Nginx configuration works. Is as I go back to the config map, is it goes in here. I rewrite it. I give it a scheme, and I call the internal Nginx web server, and then I just return that response from there. And that's pretty much as simple as that is. Nothing hardly big an issue there. The Rendertron itself is just a deployment. I have a container out there, so I come to find out Rendertron did not, up until a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, it stripped out every script tag, which was an issue because JSON-LD is inside of script tags. So they updated that. I was going to do a pull request, but the day I went to go do a pull request, some action individual 2 days before me had done a pull request on that one. So it's nice. It's now in their Rendertron service. I do have a Rendertron container out there with my update to allow JSON-LD. So that was really nice being able to go into Google's tool and modify it. But you can find that at the WB3 Tech Rendertron container to use that. That's all this Rendertron is. That's basically how that works. Nothing horribly complex there, but it's just an extra component. It's just one extra routing. One thing I have done with this is I've not used Nginx completely as a reverse proxy. My next step is to look at putting Nginx in front, because right now I'm serving two purposes with Nginx on the web for Angular. It's the web server itself, but it's also doing sort of reverse proxying. What that does, though, in a broader maintenance perspective, is now I'm tightly coupled around that area. If I want to change out my reverse proxy, how my reverse proxy mechanism is, I may want to abstract that. So one thing I'm thinking about doing in the future is this rerouting that happens, putting an Nginx in there, putting Nginx components as a reverse proxy. And then if it sees the user agent calling another set of Nginx servers that are just plain web servers and that's it to get the response, or then calling Rendertron. Because right now I have those two concerns coupled into one. And that can potentially cause a maintenance issue. Right now it's not an issue for me, but in the future it theoretically could be an issue. I just don't, I'm an architect, so I like loose coupling and high cohesion. And to me, that's tightly coupled to different concerns. So by nature, I want to decouple them. But also, when you decouple them, you have two extra things. You got to maintain. And by doing this with Helm and using a config map for Kubernetes on this one, I don't have to redeploy. When I redeploy, I don't have to rebuild my app. I just use my container that I have my Angular app in. And all I got to do is just update the config map and then redeploy the actual deployment. But that's not actually building a whole new app itself. I just put that container out there. So it's a pretty way to, it's fairly loosely coupled right now. Not completely loosely coupled, but fairly. Yeah, so that's it there. I want to show you one thing. Does anybody use Postman for this stuff? Postman? So we talked about the rendering and what does it look like. So I want to show you what the Clash application looks like. So if I go to Clatch.com and I'm going to give myself you know what? The whole time I'm on here, I think I'm talking and sharing, but I'm not recording my screen. Let me do something here real quick. There we go. So here we go. Now I'm sharing my screen. So let's go to Clash.com header. Let's call it the user agent. And then we'll just call this is full browser. Doesn't matter, it can be any user agent. So I'm gonna call it Clash.com. And here is the app that comes back. So this is just the Angular.js app. This is nothing pre-rendered. You'll go through here. One thing I do is that you will look for the meta tag, right? And as we find the meta tags, there's 6 results, and that's about it. It's some of my Apple stuff in there for some icons. But this is basically it. This is what the browser has returned. Search engines can't do much with this. There's no information about this. Can't get some cards or anything. But if I change that user agent, let's go back to the request. If I change that user agent to, let's call it Googlebot. What is it? The user agent. Change that to Googlebot, which is the agent for the Googlebot. Send that back. Give it a couple seconds. What you'll see is a very different rendering. So if I go look for meta tags right now, you'll see I have 24 results for meta tags. Because what's actually in there, now you see all of the Twitter tags and the Facebook tags and everything like that. So that's what your search engine is missing, all of this information that's being generated dynamically. So if you have anything that's generated dynamic at runtime in the browser, search engine is not going to pick it up. So there's 24, it's content in general. And what I can show you is if we go to, let me go pull up a Clatch page, for example. So if I go to Clatch.com and let's say I pull up the daily specials at St. Pete Brewing, right? The reason by this is when I click the Facebook button, what I do want to see is I want to be able to see it render that in Facebook. So there you go. And that's really as you're going through search engineization. And now that's all through an Angular app. That's all Angular app front side on Rendertron. I can save this. It's all there. If I go back and let's see what this looks like inside of Postman. If I go to Postman, still same as Googlebot when Google sees it. And send to get the response back. Now you'll see the Twitter tags as well, a description, the name of the whole event and everything like that as well. So this is the SEO approach that I learned, but also the most rooted in is your tags and your JSON-LD. We didn't cover much of JSON-LD today. Specifics around putting LD together. That could also be that could be 2 or 3 other talks about like how do you look and how do you put LD together. But this is really the reference architecture and the outcome of the reference architecture. Now I have one code base. I build everything on this web app is going to be Angular. It's all Angular components, whether they're built on Dart or they're built in JavaScript. If I just had to go to Dart in the future, I have this modular web app that all I'm starting to see is I'm building more and more features in it for the search engine. Even though I'm putting user features in there, I'm putting more and more search engines for the features for the search engine in there, which is becoming an app really for search engines. As what I've started to realize, your front end apps, like even though they're for users too. Don't get me wrong, people do on the web, but then you build native apps because your native app search engines aren't crawling native apps. And so it actually makes a native app simpler because you have to take into consideration two concerns in your web app, which is search engines and users. And then native apps is just a user concern. So that being that, I think that is the gist of everything today that I wanted to share with you guys. So any questions?
I just think it was inspired to use Rendertron. I would have said, well, that's it. I guess we're going to do it.
You're inspired to use Rendertron. That's awesome. I think it's an amazing tool. It was easy to put up. They're actively, and I think their Slack channel, I've been part of their Slack channel, but they're actively working with it. So it's really cool.
And it's an open source tool. You said you
Yeah.
modified it yourself? Wow.
Open source, yeah. So it's all open source. I got in. I didn't do. I wish I'd done the pull request, but if you go to the WB3 Tech GitHub repo, you'll see a fork of it, and then you can see my mods. It's literally just modifying one or two lines of JavaScript to not exclude any script tags with a specific type. Any other? Let's see on the. Let's look at the chat real quick. See if anybody's got questions on the chat. I think that timed that right. Good at about 45 minutes. So, is there? I mean, we got a couple minutes left. Would you like me to dig deeper into anything? Did I dig too deep into some stuff, or cover any implementations?
I'm just curious, what editor are you using?
This one? Oh, this is Visual Code. Yeah, Visual Studio Code. My favorite editor though is I use WebStorm for everything. When I'm talking to when I'm presenting things, I present it in Visual Studio Editor because most likely somebody's using that. I pay for the full IntelliJ stack because I use the whole IntelliJ stack. So I use it from Java, from all my microservices to WebStorm for all my front end things. In the Android Studio, and it's got really good Flutter capability built into it. But I like it because of DataGrip. DataGrip is their database IDE that I can use in different data stores. So I just pay the 500-ish bucks a year and use that.
I love PHP Storm.
They've got a great toolbox and they keep it up to date. Yeah. It's although I am getting. I mean, it's only $25 a month or something like that, so it's not that bad, and I use it so much. But if I was a little more cheap than I am right now, the IDE support for Angular is amazing on Visual Studio, and so it's just the database side is not there. I really use the IntelliJ stack more for the database tools than this. Yeah. I don't see any questions popping up. I guess I'll ask some questions. How many people are actually building apps right now that have to be SEO'd? Anybody building? Okay, a little bit around there. Building apps that SEO'd? Okay.
Well, I built more native.
Okay. A bit more native clients?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Talk a little bit about Dart.
We can talk about Dart. I love Dart. So we're at a GDG. Why not talk about Dart, right? Dart's amazing, by the way. I'm really thinking about moving all of my front-end technology to Dart solely. And the reason why behind that is, so Dart's compiled. It's not a scripted language, but also Dart has its own engine behind it that I've been researching more and more. And I'm digging into some of the performance specs. And at the high end of the performance, it seems to outperform Node or be just as performant as Node. Now, that's an issue because now you got to get the Dart engine in all your web browsers too, but it seems like web browsers are adopting the Dart engine. And I'm being careful about that because I've been doing some loose reading, but I haven't dug deep into who's all using it. But Dart does transpile down to JavaScript, down to ECMA 5. And you can also use ECMA 5 and ECMA 5 modules with Dart. Not specific on how to do it, but I've just been looking at it. The reason I love it too is like with Flutter. So building Dart and Flutter for your native apps is phenomenal. It all compiles down a bytecode, so I don't have to worry about Android for Android Studio for Android and iOS. I build it all in the same area, which is nice. Now I can build reusable components too, which you could use with some other things like you have Ionic out there, and then you also have what was the other one? .NET based one. We were just talking about it earlier. You could build components for that, but the biggest thing is those are just sort of abstractions. What I love about Dart is a true runtime. It's building a true runtime, and it seems like they're trying to engineer. Actually, it seems I've heard them talking about engineering a runtime for the next web and the web itself. I mean, think about the technology we use in JavaScript. This is built in like the DOM, a document object model. Just the name of a document object really speaks back to the heritage of HTTP 1.1 and what it was seen as. It was seen as sending a document electronically, but in the application days, we don't look like you think about native. Carol, you use native. We don't use documents in native coding. We don't have the concept of a document. So it's a very different meta model at the end of the day, and different model, not just model, but meta model of how we think about it. And I love Dart because they're trying to bring in that concept and that meta model into front-end programming. So it's always been there on any fat client side. Now they're just bringing that model into current web app. That's why I love it. So it's
when you build an app for Android and iOS, it also looks like an Android app and looks like iOS. Yeah, so.
exactly.
Using
Really using Dart for Fuchsia, huh? That's awesome. Like, here's what I love about it. So there's two things. Like, I love a bunch of things about Google because you can see their influence everywhere. So Angular or Google Material design has just been taken. It's taken a lot of design by storm. There's a lot of people using material design as a basis for any of their designs, their mobile app designs and their web app designs. But now that you look at Angular 7's just got released today, and there's some really cool upgrades. Like right now they have, I had to do it for my app. Well, I haven't done it yet. I need to do it. But now as I switched to Angular 7 is as you scroll through your app, it's only loading the images that are viewable in the screen. And so you used to have to do that by listening to special listeners on the DOM and then loading those images. Now you can scroll through and it's doing it for you. What I love about what they're doing with Dart and some of these, Dart's not a framework, Dart's a language, but Flutter itself is a framework. What they're doing is they're bringing a language in and they're bringing a runtime in that's made for the future of application-based processing as we go to basically, our mobile environment, but also the frameworks they're bringing in. The frameworks are there to solve those problems, and they keep resolving a lot of those problems. Like Angular Material, I don't have to design anything. I used MD Bootstrap for my web. It's based upon material design, but I'd almost, and I say almost only because with Angular Material, there are still some components you have to design yourself, like date pickers and time pickers and stuff like that. MD Bootstrap solved a lot of those problems for me, so I decided I'll just spend the money to get MD Bootstrap, and then in the future when I need to optimize, I'll just go straight to Angular Material. And our Flutter uses the material components in there. But the cool thing is the component I built is a JavaScript component. I can build that now, use it in Dart, and then use it with use it on my front end side. But if I switch all the way to Dart anyways, it doesn't matter. So, but yeah, also look at TypeScript. It's like TypeScript's a transpilation. TypeScript's trying to make it feel like it's object oriented, when at the end of the day, it's not a language. It's a scripted language. It's not. You can bring some object-oriented principles into it, but it's a JavaScript by its nature is what's the word I'm looking for? It's a prototypical language. So it's based on prototypes, and so you don't really have of course you don't have compile time checks at all. So that's the beauty. I love compiled languages because of that. Compilation. Once you compile, you find your errors. Think about just writing pure ECMA. I remember writing pure ECMA Notepad. And you have nothing to help you out, and so if you're missing something, you have no clue where it's at, no compilation or nothing. So there you go. There's my whole deal on Dart. I love it. I think it's once I get the app up and running and I get people on it, I'm gonna start building the web app or the actual mobile app. I'm gonna be using Dart and Flutter, and then based upon that is gonna see how I'm gonna migrate the web app to Dart. and then go from there and see what the downsides are to migrating. I haven't done the full downside analysis yet because I know it could transpile to ECMA 5, so I shouldn't have an issue. And one thing I was reading, or I was reading about, was that you can, if they have the Dart engine, it will use the Dart natively, or else you can switch it on and off yourself. So I'll have to figure that one out as I dig deeper into it. Yeah, there you go. Just a bit about Dart. Yeah. Sorry, let me turn this off to the. There you go. A question?
What do you think the direction of server-side JavaScript is going to be? Like, it seems like Node is less popular than C, or do you agree, or do you think?
That's going to be. I think your server-side JavaScript, like, it's to stay for a while. Like, it's so fundamental to how the web operates. Like, you know, it's so fundamental, and because something like Node, like when Node came out, it made JavaScript isomorphic, so it's completely through the stack. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Something like Dart, if not Dark, something like it will upset it, I believe, because then it will be a true language, a true runtime built for the new set of web technologies. And I think that's what's really going to upset it. So could the language be similar to, could the syntax be similar to JavaScript? Maybe, but I think the way you see it going, like with TypeScript, you know, TypeScript, that abstraction layer is really trying to bring the O principles and bring that sort of compilation check in there. And so I think that's, I don't think it's going anywhere soon, but I think it could, I think it's not going, what am I trying to say? As soon as a competitor comes on and people grab it, people may start running from JavaScript sooner than people would believe. That'd be my opinion. Like with Dart, if I like Dart enough, like I'm dumping it. I'm going straight to Dart, and I probably won't look back. Not that JavaScript is bad or anything like that. It's just this technology is more suited to what we need to do going forward. And JavaScript has just been, like TypeScript has just been modified and modified. Is modifying the basis. You know, I have ECMA 7 coming out, and you have ECMA 6, but they're more becoming something like C#, you know, Java. So yeah. Also, the fact that like Node. So a couple things I want to talk about too is the runtimes. Talk about JavaScript. So let's bring out the language. It comes down to more to me to runtimes and technology underneath. You think your browser is a single-threaded application. And so asynchronous processing, that's why Node was brought in, because it's asynchronous capability, right? Works on one thread, schedules. It feels to the user as a bunch of things are happening in the background, but really it's just scheduling and asynchronously happening. What you're seeing with Dart is you're seeing true parallel processing being brought in. Think about PWAs and service workers. Now introducing service workers is just introducing a second thread into the browser itself. And so what you're starting to see in the background, these frameworks like PWAs and service workers and some of these patterns that are evolving, these patterns are all replicating compiled parallelizable language or parallelizable technology, Java, C#, that kind of stuff. And so it's not because it's Java, it's not because it's C#, it's not because of this, it's because those are the types of underlying components and underlying principles that you need to run at scale applications. And so that's really why I'm liking Dart, because to me, that's the first push I've seen into doing that. And so you can run and you can, Dart's got some, I'm not educated enough on it yet, but Dart has some really cool parallel processing capabilities. And to me, it felt how they modeled a bit of Dart is how they did Go as well. Because Go, you run on as few thread possible, but you have Go routines. And so you can switch Go routines on and off a thread, because spinning up a thread and managing it is a lot of overhead for any processing system. So they've done a bit of that with Dart too. So they're, you know, in Google's eye, how Google looks at their web-based applications. You think about, was it most of the people run on like a low 3G signal or like a high 2G signal? But when we build apps, we may build it to something like a 4G signal. So like one thing I do is I throttle every time I test to see if this happens, because most of the people in the world who, you know, a lot of Google customers they're not running 4 or 5G. Hell, they're not even running good 3G. They're good 2G at best. And so what are the techniques, and the same things like Dart, like being able to put that and put some of that computational power back into, you know, and some of those capabilities back into the client itself or onto the machine that the actual user is using, is I think what you're seeing the evolution towards. And so to answer your question with that, JavaScript is just a language that represents, how to interact with the browser, right? If we change that interaction, we change the underlying technology. That's why I think JavaScript itself as a concept will probably disappear, and then whatever takes over will be the new JavaScript. That's my opinion. It's a long opinion. So, any other questions? We're at 7:37, so I think that was good. Thank you all for switching back over. Well, thanks everybody for coming out. Appreciate no problem. Yeah. I will once I get the repos, I'll post them up, and then once I get the repos, I'll post them up. We'll have this video out there if anybody ever wants to go back over it, and reach out to me anytime. Cool. Awesome. And for every I'll post the links. I'll post this video as well, and Meetup. And then for everybody who is on YouTube, bye-bye. Oh, there's the video. Bye-bye.